Today's topic, Waves plugins that I still use in 2021. If we had made this list 10, 15 years ago, it would probably look very different to the one that we're about to see. But just like with the free plugins video that came out, I don't know, a week or two ago, the point of this is to really talk about why these plugins are still in my regular rotation. Your list would likely look very different, but I'll give you my explanation and reasoning for why I continue to use these things, even though there are so many other, not only Waves plugins, but just other plugins on the market, and many of which do similar things to the ones that we're going to look at here. So let's jump into the DAW and let's take a look. We're here on the Waves plugin page, and I have to say this is kind of overwhelming. I definitely haven't used all of the plugins that are on here, but over the years I've used a lot of them in different locations and things like that. But some of these things are brand new, so to be fair, I can't say that I've tried everything. Maybe there is something on here that would really jump out to me, but it seems unlikely at this point, because if there was something that I really wanted or really needed and one of these plugins did it, I probably would have sought it out and bought it. So let's jump into the DAW and let's see the Waves plugins that I still use today. So we are now into the DAW and we're looking at the Waves plugins that I use, and I've sorted them from most used to least used, and we'll talk about why I still have them and where I tend to apply them. So the first one that we're looking at is MaxxVolume. This is an upwards and downwards compressor / limiter that's really designed just to bring up the loudness. And for when you don't want to use OTT or something that has a really, really aggressive sound, this is actually still pretty transparent, and it just does exactly what it says. It can get you to your max volume. I don't use the gate or the leveler ever. There's also a soft and a loud mode. I tend to always use loud mode. And let's just do an example with this where we're going to kind of overdo it so you can see how it works. We'll apply it to this full little music loop. Let's take a listen. And we're just gonna go kind of crazy with it. So here we go. This turns it on. And we're gonna set the low threshold. So anything below that is gonna be brought up, and we'll be really aggressive. Let's set it at like 30. Little bit. Okay, and then we can apply our high threshold. So a lot of times that might be all you need to do. You won't actually have to go after the peaks, but in this case, we'll do that as well. Let's just see how much gain we've already brought in and adjust. Okay, so we're now roughly gain matched, level matched, and let's tear it on and off. So here we go off. And then back on. So yeah, killing the dynamics of music, whatever. That's why you use this one. And it's still very much a go-to for me because it's so fast. You can do the same thing with probably built-in plugins, like I said before, but the speed of this one is why it definitely makes this list and why I use it all the time. Okay, let's move on now to our next effect, which is the RVox stereo. Now, this one is, again, it's one of these kind of magical plugins where you put this onto a vocal and it just works. It does a great job of just leveling it, keeping things pretty transparent, like you very rarely hear the compressor working. And then after you've applied it, if you want to do some kind of a specialty compression, you can definitely do that. But a lot of times this one gets you very close to where you want to be. And we're just going to apply it to this little vocal loop here. And I'm pretty sure I've used this one before. This is like the easiest plugin in the world to use. Again, that's why I love it. I don't have to worry about attack or release settings or trying to dial anything in. It just does what I want it to do. It's also a gate if you want to use it. Never have. कैसे संभालूं मैं कैसे So this signal has probably been compressed already, and we can still apply this and it's flattering. So it would definitely help it just jump through the mix quickly. And it's also, it can be a finishing effect in that way too. And it doesn't just have to be on a vocal. So when you need something to try to push to the front, and this is a great plugin to use. You can throw it on, add some compression, see if you can then get the clarity, especially on those kind of softer moments. So there you can hear it working a little bit and clutching down. That being said, I think this is an amazing one. It's one that still gets used all the time by lots of people, and I am also very much in support of it. Next on the list, we have the Real ADT, which is a double tracking effect. This one is one of these like Abbey Roads licensed ones. And you can see I already have it pre-set up. This is the way I tend to use it. And I use it on mono synthesizers or on like mono bass parts or guitar parts. If we want to get a little bit of that stereo flair, it's a unique effect. It's basically creating a double of it, and then running through that double, the speed is changing on like the tape recorder. So that sounds very complicated, but here's what the effect sounds like. We're going to apply it to this bass part, and I've already added a amp, a little bit of distortion to it, so that will cut through. And let's just turn it on and see what it sounds like. And again, it's nice that for the source and for the double, we also have drive controls if we need them. I always leave the LFO on random and I give it the full range and just kind of let it do its thing. It never really goes all the way out there, I've noticed. And I tend to set the speed right at 0 at the beginning. So sometimes it is just kind of crossing and blending over. We would want to apply some kind of a mono maker here for the really low stuff. But again, just really quick at getting you this effect. Could you do the same thing with something else? Probably. But the speed of this is what makes it so useful. And there's another version that's available too that has, I think, a whole nother tape machine, another double that's set up as well, very to the source. So you can go even further with it if you want to. It's going a little faster than maybe I'd want it to, but all in all, I like that effect. It's a unique one. It's something that's hard for me to replicate, and again, quick and easy. Up next on the list is the Compressor. Okay, now this one, and I always use the legacy view. This one I don't use as frequently anymore, but this used to be my go-to compressor back in the day because it had a lot of different kind of modes and ways to adjust how that gain reduction was working. It also has a nice automatic release control, so you don't have to fiddle with that too much, or I think maybe this offsets it. It's been a little while since I've used it. Let's try to apply this to some of these drums here. We'll probably come back to this particular signal again. So this works like any regular old compressor, so there's really nothing that exciting about it. So this probably wouldn't be my first choice of compressor on this particular guy. All that being said, it still is a very versatile and useful compressor to have in the arsenal. I'll try it on things, but to be honest, I don't really use this one that much anymore. Nothing compared to how much I'd use the RVox. Okay, so the next thing that we have, these ones are a little bit more legacy. The API 2500, this is something that I will try on drum buses. Usually I go with something else, but back in the day, this would always be my go-to compressor on buses. And that's why I still hold on to it and I still try it on things, because I remember when I was really first getting into learning compression and learning mixing and some of that stuff, I put this on something one time and it had just like truly a magical effect. I put it on, it just sounded amazing. And ever since then, it's kind of held a nice place in my heart. And that's why it's getting on this list. I know that there's other companies that make this thing now, but let's apply it to our drums here. Easy to work with again. So here we found some settings that I think are fine. I actually just went into the regular release times compared to the variable one, which you'd probably more so use on a full mix. I also like the fact that you have this like left and right link. And so I brought this down a little bit, so the compressor is reacting a little bit differently to the left versus the right channel. And in this case, that kind of works well. I've gone to hard and loud on the tone, and I've went feedback style, which usually has a little bit of a warmer sound and sometimes just makes that low end feel a little bit stronger than the new feed forward. So, personal preference. And last but not least, we have the Manny American EQ, which this one would probably rank higher on the list except for one user concept or whatever, is the fact that we cannot change this gain to be stepped. And that sounds like such a silly thing to annoy me, but it does. Like, I wish that I could just turn the knobs and have it do this and not give me this readout, because this just annoys me. Like, I would rather be able to just go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, or -2, -4, -6, 10. That's just me. But this is a cool EQ because all of these bands, or a lot of these bands, are utilizing different hardware. So, you know, he's listened to all of the hardware and said, hey, I really like the way the highs sound on this EQ, or I really like the way the low end sounds on this one. And it is a really nice sounding EQ. I just wish we had that one thing to be a little bit different, because as you can tell, we flip through the frequencies like this. I wish we could do that with the gain. But again, that's one of those to each their own kind of thing. So let's just apply this to the full mix thing here and just fiddle around with it for a minute. So I've just gone ahead and decided that I would just preset this thing up. So you can see the various bands that I've emphasized or cut from a little bit. And here's how it finally sounds. So even just having that little experience of going through and listening to the various bands, it reminds me of why I actually put this on the list. This thing does sound just amazing. It can really flatter certain frequencies. The sad part is I just don't have that stepped control that I've grown accustomed to and prefer using with on EQs. That sounds like such a silly thing, but sometimes I like including that in these videos so people can kind of understand the rationale behind decisions and why anybody you see uses the plugins that they use. The reason I don't use that is because of the step control thing. Does the plugin still sound good? Yes. Is it a really great EQ to have? Yeah. But if you are annoyed by something about it, maybe you don't want to buy it. That's going to do it for the Waves plugins that I use in 2021. Hopefully this has been useful and informative to you in hearing my thought process and why I use these things. So what I'm trying to stress here is that for each of these, there's a reason why I continue to use them versus using something different. They all serve a very specific purpose. The Renaissance compressor, if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't really use that regularly anymore. And then the same thing with the API and the Manny American EQ, but they still have a function and a purpose for me at times. So I haven't completely abandoned them, and it's not like I never use them or think about them. I do think about them. And that's kind of how you yourself are determining what plugins do you really need, what's the stuff that you're using on a daily basis, and can you justify it? Can you justify having it and using it? Sound quality is very important, but for me, ease of use is probably just as important. So user friendliness. So while the Manny American EQ was one of the best sounding EQs I've ever personally used, at least in a plugin form, the fact that it doesn't give me stepped controls on the volume is enough to annoy me to a point where I don't really think about using it that much, or as much as I probably should, given how much it can flatter some of those frequencies. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.